Hi there, my name is Daniel Hampton, and today I'm going to be talking about Colossians chapter 3, verses 1 through 4. I'm going to begin by reading the verses, and then after that we're going to break them down and discuss the themes of the verse. Here's Colossians chapter 3, beginning in verse 1. Since then you have been raised with Christ. Set your hearts on things above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things, for you have died, and your life is now hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, appears, then you also will appear with him in glory. The first thing that jumps out at us when we look at these chapters is that these verses are clearly written for the Christian, meaning someone who has given their life freely to Christ and trusted in him for their salvation to save them from their sins. This is not a verse. These are not verses for the non-Christian. Which also brings us to the theme of this verse. And the theme of these verses is that once we have given our lives up to Christ, they are no longer ours, and we are meant to live for him. Those are the themes of the verses, and you will see that that clearly develops as we progress through these verses. In verses 1 and 2 of this passage, we see that Paul commands us to keep our minds and our hearts on the things of God, and the things above is what the language that he specifically uses. Because if we don't, there will be consequences. We see this with Peter when Jesus called him to walk on water towards him. Peter steps out, and at first he's doing great. He's walking right towards him, and there's nothing that is distracting him from his mission, which is to get to Jesus. However, the story does not end there, unfortunately. Peter eventually gets distracted by how hard the rain is coming down, and that the storm is causing the rain to come down, and how the wind is pushing these huge waves to go right past him, and also how deep the water is below him. And eventually, Peter gets so distracted by these things that really couldn't touch him anyway because he was working towards Jesus. He gets so distracted by those things that he eventually loses his focus on Jesus, and eventually starts to sink. And if it wasn't for Christ intervening and saving him, he most likely would have died in the water. And of course, just like Peter, we are also surrounded by storms. We may not have waves coming past us all the time, but we have storms in our lives that try to get in between us and Christ, and they try to distract our focus and move our focus off on doing what we should be doing, which is working to get closer to Christ, and instead veer us off in the wrong direction. This is something that happens very regularly, and the only way to combat that in our Christian lives is to focus on the things above. Focus on Jesus and his sacrifice that he made for us, and his love for us, and focus on God and his just wrath, and focus on his commandments and his standard, and also his love for us. If we don't focus on those things, we are going to be swept away and lose our focus on Christ, just like Peter did. But these verses also tell us that we have died. In verse 3 it says, "For you died, and your life is now hidden with Christ in God." When we become saved, we die to our old self. That's a phrase we use quite regularly in church, but we don't really truly grasp what it means. I like to put it in literal terms. When we die with Christ, we become like a dead person. A dead person does not care about their own comforts or their financial well-being or their own safety, because all those things have already been given up because they're dead. We too are also dead. We are dead to ourselves, meaning anything like our comforts or our financial status or our safety, none of that matters because it's already been given up. We should care about those things just like a dead person would, which is not at all. Because all those things have already been given up when we died. But just because we have died with Christ does not mean we have nothing to do A dead person doesn't have anything to do. They're not going to be going to pick their kids up from soccer practice anytime soon or going to the grocery store because they're dead. There's nothing that they can do. Well, we're not like that. Just because we've died with Christ, it doesn't mean the story ends there. Verse 1 says, we have been raised with Christ. So, though we also die with Christ by giving him our lives, we're also raised with Christ. After we have been raised with Christ, we exist only to bring worship to him and to make his name known and his name greater. And it is our mission to do this until we see Jesus again through his second coming or through our eventual physical death. In light of these verses and what they say, I want to close today by giving you a challenge. It's the same challenge that Paul gave the church when he wrote this letter to the Colossians, and that is, live your life like it belongs to Jesus and not to you. This is the challenge that he gave us when he wrote this letter, and this is the challenge that it may be hard for us to live out, but if we keep our minds on the things above and realize that we have died and nothing matters but making God's name known and worshiping him, it is a challenge that I believe that we can accomplish. Thank you.